Airline Pilot Guy, episode 106 is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/airlinepilotguy. Over 150,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. And you may be wondering, what are you playing, Captain Jeff? This is not your normal intro music. Well, I got this feedback from Tony. Now, I don't know if he's kidding around or not, but let's just read it. Hi, Jeff. Just finished episode 105, which I enjoyed as much as all your other fabulous podcasts, but would like to say your listener, Brett, who wrote in, was being a bit mean, as I personally only skipped the first 8 minutes and play you back at speed 1.2 times normal. All the very best, Tony. And then he adds, P.S. How about playing a small trombone intro someday? So here you go, Tony. This is for you. Now many of you are going to write in and say, I skipped the first hour. Whatever. To each their own, right? All right, so let me turn that off and get to what I really want to say, which is Airline Pilot Guy, episode 106.
Flight 209er, you're clear for takeoff. Roger. LA United 123.9. Roger.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from my side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 1010 in the Rosen Plaza Hotel in Orlando, Florida. In this episode, arson on a 777, airlines warned of a new shoe bomb threat, and how to survive a plane crash. All this news, plus more, and, of course, your feedback, coming up on episode 106. So get all settled in, tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions, electronic devices powered on. Flight 106 is ready for pushback. Hello, hello, hello. I'm back in Orlando after having gone home to California. Well, I say home. I don't live in California. That's where I'm from, and that's where my mom and my sister live, and I made it out for a quick visit over the weekend and then flew back yesterday and changed out the old clothes and put in new clothes in the suitcase, and here I am. Day 1 of 4, basically the identical trip I flew last week. And it's probably going to be one of those kind of deals where I end up, I was hoping to record the whole darn show today, but as usual, I wasn't quite ready to go when I got here to the room, and I have a time frame that I have to work with here. It's about 3:15 in the afternoon, and I'm planning on heading over to the Brick House Tavern and Tap for my Orlando meetup, and I don't know if anybody's actually going to show up, but that's okay if you don't, because I'm going to have a good time anyway, and I'm going to drink some great beer, and I'm going to eat some great food at the Brick House Tavern and Tap on International Drive. But I'm hoping that at least one or two of you show up and we can hang out and talk aviation. But I need to leave the hotel here at about 4:30 or sooner. So I have about an hour, maybe a little bit more than an hour of recording to play with here. And then I'll stop, and I don't know when I'll resume. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, maybe Thursday in Tampa. Who knows? It's going to be a mystery, isn't it? But just hang in there, and we'll get through it together. All right, so that is all I have to say about that. And let's keep moving here so that we don't have too many people skipping too much of the show. Let's do this. Yes, the favorite part for many of you.
I love coffee, I love tea, I love the Java Jive and it loves me. Coffee and tea and the Java and me. A cup, a cup, a cup, a cup, a cup. Boy. I love Java, sweet and hot. Whoops, Mr. Moto, I'm a coffee.
Mr. Moto?
Shoot me the pot.
What? Who is this Mr. Moto guy? Well, thanks to Tillman from Berlin. He writes, "Hi, Captain Jeff. Quick addition to the discussion about the Mr. Moto reference in your beloved Ink Spot song. The character of Mr. Moto was a secret agent and spy in novels by John P. Marquand in the 1930s and 40s. He was Japanese, smart as a whip, and well trained in martial arts. However, built very small, or fairly small, he would always be underestimated." A total of 8 Mr. Moto movies were produced between 37 and 39, starring Peter Lorre as Mr. Moto. In every movie, there is typically one or more scenes where someone confronts Mr. Moto in an aggressive or condescending way. Mr. Moto would always be very patient and extremely friendly in a formal way, and eventually he would beat up the completely surprised ruffian. That's killing him with kindness, right? A trademark of Mr. Moto's was the glass of milk. Whenever asked if he wanted a drink, he would order a glass of cold milk. In the very alcohol-rich environment of the 1930s movies, this contributed a lot to the character being underestimated. As this is where the ink spots come in with, "Oops, Mr. Moto, I'm a coffee pod." All the best. Tillman from Berlin, who likes airplanes and movies from the 1930s. And he said, "P.S. Inspired by you, I actually bought a CD by the Ink Spots." So, again, in the background here, the Ink Spots, recorded in 1940, the Java Jive. Wait up, percolator. I love coffee, I love tea. I love the Java Jive and it loves me. Coffee and tea and the Java and me. A cup. Boy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, if you're interested in supporting the show, head over to airlinepilotguy.com/coffee for details about how you can contribute to my coffee fund. Thank you. Okay, and I mentioned the Orlando meetup today, so that is it. So, you'll be happy to know that I'm finished with all the details at the beginning of the podcast, and let's start with some aviation news. Okay, according to the Associated Press, just a few days ago in Washington, U.S. authorities issued a warning on Wednesday, that was last week, to airlines flying to the United States to watch out for militants who may have hidden bombs in their shoes. The warning came from the Department of Homeland Security, and it is consistent with concerns security agents have about militants trying to smuggle explosives onto airplanes in shoes, cosmetics, or liquids. The sources said the warning principally applied to flights originating overseas and heading for the United States, rather than domestic flights or planes headed overseas from the United States. However, some sources said in the warnings that the warnings did not mean that the United States had specific intelligence indicating a plot to use a shoe bomb overseas was in progress. One source said the alert was being issued out of an abundance of caution. A second source said the alert was not a big deal. So, not really a lot has been made about that warning about the shoe bombs, but I just wanted to warn you. Look out for those militants wearing weird-looking shoes, especially if they look like Herman Munster's shoes. You know Herman Munster from the TV show back in the 60s. If you're old as I am, you remember what I'm talking about. And he was the Frankenstein dude character in the Munsters, and he wore these shoes that were like The soles were probably 4 or 5 inches thick. It was a good show. I love that show. Okay. How to survive a plane crash. I don't know what a plane crash is, but I'm going to tell you how to survive one right now. No, I'm sorry. How to survive a plane crash. This is from the Huffington Post. Thanks to Vernon in Colorado. And he said, hey, thanks, Jeff. I told him that I was going to talk about it on the show. And he says, this brings up a thought which goes along with another of your soapboxes. I'd like to see the requirement that window shades remain open during takeoff and landing, at least during that 11 minutes the article says is the highest risk time. Thanks again for your dedication to your podcast, Vernon. Thank you, Vernon. I agree. I think a lot of airlines overseas have this as a policy. They have the window shades up during the takeoff and the first several minutes of the flight, and also for landing. And I think it's probably a good idea for all U.S. airlines to adopt as well. But anyway, this article from the Huffington Post is a good one. I don't know if I'm going to read the whole thing, because you can do that, because I'll give you a link. All you have to do is go to my show notes at airlinepilotguy/ whatever the URL is going to be for this episode. Just look for episode 106. If you're watching the video right now, I should have a link there down here pointing to the post on my website, and there you'll have the show notes along with active links. So look for this article. Should be somewhere near the top. And I'll read a little bit of it. Actually, I'll hit some of the highlights. How to survive a plane crash. Number 1, keep your shoes and socks on. Practice unbuckling your seatbelt. Have a plan and a plan B. In other words, when you sit down, count the number of rows between you and the closest emergency exit. If visibility is low during an emergency, you'll be able to feel your way out of the plane if you know exactly how many seats are between you and the door. Actually, that's a good idea for staying in hotels as well. And, honestly, I have to admit I haven't done this too many times in the recent past, but maybe I'll pay attention to it today. By figuring out where the closest emergency exit is on the hallway, where the stairway is, and how many doors or how many places that I'll go by on the way to make sure that, in case I can't see anything because of smoke. But that's good advice for an airplane. Know where you are, how many rows between you and the closest exit is. In both directions, if you have a couple different exits to choose from. Okay, don't wait for instructions in a catastrophe. Yeah, don't wait for somebody to tell you what to do. It says, according to Ben Sherwood, author of The Survivors Club, The Secrets and Science That Could Help Save Your Life. Actually, I added help. It didn't. The secrets and science that could save your life. 80% of people are likely to respond to a disaster with behavioral inaction. Don't sit and wait for help. Get out as fast as you can and try to help your fellow passengers get moving if they appear frozen. Another thing it says, use the correct brace position. And it talks about, in the article, about what the correct brace position is. Forget about your belongings. That's dumb. Your life is the most important belonging you have. Don't worry about your stuff. It's just stuff. Wear the right clothing. Hey, where have you heard that? Planes carry so much fuel that post-crash fires are a real concern, so avoid wearing highly flammable clothes made from polyesters or nylons. Instead, opt for natural fibers like cotton or wool. And ladies, and maybe some of you guys as well, leave the high heels and flip-flops. That applies to both women and men. Leave them in your suitcase. High heels can puncture evacuation slides, and flip-flops can easily fall off, leaving you barefoot. And you may not want to be barefoot, regardless of how cold or how hot it is outside. Walking around in wreckage barefoot, not a good idea. It says, stay alert during these 11 minutes. Again, Ben Sherwood says that 80% of all plane crashes happen within the first 3 minutes of takeoff or in the 8 minutes before landing. Stay focused and alert during this time before popping in your earphones or downing a cocktail. Sit in an aisle seat within 5 rows of an exit. Okay, good advice. and then once the airplane has come to a stop, get away from the wreckage. But don't get so far away that people won't find you, because they're going to be looking for the survivors of the plane crash somewhere in the vicinity of the plane crash. So, again, this article by Caroline Morse, the Huffington Post, will be in the show notes, and I really highly recommend that you read the whole thing. So thanks again, Vernon, for sending that article, making me aware of it. All right, let's move on. How about American Airlines training the next generation of pilots as the shortage looms? This is from local affiliate in Dallas, Texas, WFAA. Let's see, it talks about the fact that Fort Worth-based American Airlines says it hopes to hire 1,500 new pilots in the next 5 years, and many of the major legacy airlines are doing the same, by the way. Let's see, what was the point of me clipping this? Oh, it says that, this is why. American Airlines is doing something few others are by raising its own generation of pilots. Now, many of the European carriers are doing this, and other worldwide carriers, but not very many here in the United States. American Airlines has partnerships with 20 universities across the country. If students graduate in 4 years and maintain a certain grade point average, they're guaranteed an interview with American Eagle. Only guaranteed an interview. Doesn't guarantee that you're going to get hired. But if the airline hires them, they get a $10,000 signing bonus to help offset education expenses. Okay, $10,000 is not going to cover everything you're saying, but hey, at least it's something. It used to be not that long ago that people getting hired by the regionals were actually paying $10,000 to the airline to pay for their training. Yeah, you heard me right. So anyway, thank you, American Airlines, for initiating this kind of program. I hope that others will do the same. And I'm sure that other airlines are going to get very creative very quickly as the time approaches when it's getting harder and harder to find qualified people to fly. Now, I know that I've been getting some comments from episode 103 about the pilot shortage, and it's coming sooner, and it's worse than, or more significant than expected. And a lot of people are saying, hey, look, I have plenty of experience, and I still don't have a job. So there are exceptions to that rule, but in the big scheme of things, in the next 3 to 5 to 10 years, it's going to be impactful, and it is already impacting some of the smaller regional airlines, the very small ones, having to actually not fly airplanes and stop service to some of the small markets that they once served. And also, you might want to check out my Facebook page where I shared an article from the Airline Pilots Association President Lee Moak, and he says that the pilot shortage is really not because there's a shortage of qualified people, it's that there's a shortage of good pay and benefits, and that's why good qualified people are not being attracted to this industry, because they can do so much better doing something else. So that's, again, something that the airline industry needs to be aware of, and I'm sure they are, and do something about. Raise the pay, make the starting pay better, increase the benefits, make this an attractive job. Then you're going to get high-quality people to do this job. Until you can figure out how to make an airliner that doesn't have a pilot. And I know you're working on that, airlines out there. But in the meantime, until that day comes, which I don't believe it will, you're going to have to pay us well to do a great job. Okay, stepping down from my soapbox. Thank you very much. And if you don't agree with me, well, you're wrong. Get your own podcast. Okay, now, this is something that happened Wednesday, I think, or sometime last week, and on the 17th, whatever day that was, after the last episode anyway. A Etihad Boeing 777-300 performing flight 461 from Melbourne, Australia, to Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, was en route over the Indian Ocean west of Australia when the fire detectors in a lavatory in economy class triggered alarm. Smoke and flames were visible from a bin in the lavatory. The cabin crew quickly extinguished the fire and contained it. About 2 hours later, the fire detector of another lavatory in the economy class triggered alarm. Again, cabin crew needed to extinguish a small fire in the bin of that lavatory. The captain decided to divert the aircraft to Jakarta, Indonesia, where the aircraft landed safely. All passengers disembarked and were questioned by Indonesian police. Apparently, they questioned all of the passengers and couldn't determine who set the fires. And I think that they took away all matches and lighters from all of the passengers and allowed them to get back on the airplane, and they continued the flight. Okay, so again, here's an airplane full of pilots, cabin crew, and passengers. Somebody has set 2 different fires in 2 different lavatories at different times. They take everybody off the airplane, question them for about 4 hours, put them back on the airplane, take away their matches and their lighters. But the person and or persons that started these fires is back on the airplane. I don't think that's a good idea. But according to several articles I've read, it said that the crew didn't really have a choice because the visas were running out or some kind of a diplomatic problem with all those passengers in the terminal in Jakarta. I don't know. I think it's a bigger problem to risk everybody's life or everybody's lives by putting everybody back on the airplane. And a lot of passengers were not very happy about that decision, by the way. So, everybody should be behaving right now, right? So they take off from Indonesia, head out over the Indian Ocean to Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. And guess what? About smack dab in the middle of the Indian Ocean, another fire is started. And then another one. And a third. So, let's see. Total of, is that right? Or is it just 3 total? I may be wrong about that, so I'll look at another article here and see. But anyway, we have an arsonist or arsonists on board an airplane out in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And that's not, fire is never a good thing on an airplane, but especially when there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to land but, the ocean. Okay, so this is another article. That first one was from Aviation Herald. This one is from the Daily Mail, UK publication. Yeah, so it was a total of 5. So the first 2 caused the divert to Indonesia, and then they put everybody on, and then they set out over the ocean, and 3 more times when finally the instruction was given from the pilot crew that everybody stay seated. They positioned cabin crew near all the lavatories and didn't allow anybody to use the restroom. Let me see. I'm going to go through here and let's see. This is from Ms. Martins, 27-year-old golfer competing in the Australian Masters tournament, told Norwegian Radio and Television Public Broadcasting NKR that a fire was started on board directly while we were above the sea. A disgruntled passenger takes to Instagram to complain about the flight, which was forced to land in Jakarta. After 2 fires were lit in the cabin toilets in midair, after security checks took place, the passengers returned to the plane and completed the journey to the United Arab Emirates, but 3 more fires were lit. Etihad cabin crew put the plane on lockdown due to the fires, and people were unable to leave their seats, and no food was served for the last part of the journey. According to Ms. Martins, after a few hours into the flight from Melbourne, I noticed that it smelled like smoke. but I thought everything was fine and I just fell asleep. About 2 hours after, I woke up as the fire alarm went off again. She tells of how the airline searched passengers on the emergency stopover in Jakarta and the fear caused when the passengers had to board the plane after nothing was found. Passengers were told that due to visa issues, they had to get back on the plane and could not remain in Jakarta. We were all sent on a plane again without knowing who had done it. It is just not nice to know that someone will set fire to the aircraft you will be traveling on. She said that flight attendants told her that because of the compression in the cabin, fires needed to be extinguished within 90 seconds. Not sure what that's referring to. A worried daughter told another publication about her parents' horrible and stressful journey, saying that the worst thing was that no one explained the situation either to me or my parents. They didn't drink or eat anything for 19 hours, and they had to have their diabetes medicine. Well, there's a lot of investigation and questioning going on now by the airline and the air crew, etc. And as far as we know, still no idea what was going on there, who set the fires, although no arrests have been made, but there are reports that there is a female suspect. I was wondering myself, thinking, is this one of these dry runs for another terrorist action, trying to start a fire to cause some kind of a major distraction? Maybe the purpose of the fire wasn't to bring the airplane down, but just to create a distraction so that some other sinister thing could occur. I don't know. But whatever this was, it was not a fun time for the passengers or crew. And we'll hopefully find out more as time goes on. And of course, here I'm looking at this article from the Daily Mail online, and they have a picture of an Etihad Airbus 340, although the airplane was a Boeing 777. The media strikes again, right? Okay. And finally, we have an update from the Ethiopian co-pilot who hijacked his own airplane last week. And the latest update here is that he was mourning and distressed over his uncle's death about a month before. Well, that's really not much of an update, is it? I don't know where he is, though. Is he still in Switzerland, or has he been extradited to Ethiopia? I don't know. All right, enough of that. How am I doing on the time? Shoot. I can keep going here. Oh, shoot. Oh, good. Oh, great. Here we go. Your messages.
Captain, incoming message.
Thank you. Now, first of all, I'd like to apologize to Ollie Nichols, who sent me a follow-on email feedback saying, hey, what happened to my feedback? Did you lose it? And I swear, Ollie, I thought that I'd read, and maybe I did, I just don't remember exactly what episode and what I said to answer your question, but I do know that I looked at it, and at least in my head I answered it, but apparently that wasn't very helpful to you. So I do apologize for that. So that's why I'm going to start off with your feedback right away. And again, and I remember even talking about how do you pronounce Ollie? It's O-L-I. I'm going to say Ollie. And gosh, I could swear that I answered your question. But, well, just in case you have. Now, if I did answer your question, and you listeners out there, I love you guys and gals. If you've heard me read this question and give an answer, it's probably going to be a different answer. and bear with me. I'm sorry if I'm redoing something here. Dear Jeff, I've just read your website and listened to your podcast. I found it extremely interesting. I wonder if you could give me a little advice. For as long as I can remember, I've wanted to become a pilot. If I'm honest, I've never wanted to do anything else. I am 17 years old and have just started my A levels. I'm not really sure what A levels are, but let me continue. First, I'm not that good at maths, having only obtained a C grade at GCSE. I don't know what that means either. But I am confident enough that I picked physics A level. I obtained an A asterisk, I think maybe an A plus, at physics GCSE. And I don't find that maths a challenge at all. Do you think that maths is going to be a problem when it comes to training selection? I've been told that you can enroll as a cadet without getting selected through an airline, but the chances of you getting a job with the airline are extremely low. So I think airline programs are the way forward. For my A levels, I picked history, physics, law, and business studies. I also plan to pick up an AS in economics next year. I am targeted B grade for all these subjects, but hope to achieve higher. I'm British, and I apologize if the education system doesn't really make any sense. You can tell that okay, Ollie, I really don't understand a lot of what you're saying here. But I think I get the general gist of what you're asking. He goes on to say, it would be great to hear what your opinions are. Would it be possible for some example selection questions? I've looked all over the internet, but I can't seem to find any. Okay. Gosh, and I swear I said, yeah, go back to episode, what was it, 102? I don't remember. Let me find my website. And yeah, episode 102, interview advice, where I talked about some interview tips and some good resources for finding interview questions and selection process questions, that kind of thing. I have a bunch of links in the show notes to episode 102 if you want to look through that and see if there's anything helpful there regarding that question. Now, as far as, do you have to be really good at math? I think really, and I'm learning this myself, Ollie, that it really depends on where you're trying to get an aviation career. I mean, are you trying to do this in the UK? Are you trying to do it in Europe, in the Middle East, in the United States? The only one I can really, really vouch for or answer for is in the United States. And I would say, and again, I've been doing this for 25 years now. 25 years ago, when I was applying for airlines and I was interviewed, etc., I'm not so sure that what I actually studied in, and I'm assuming A levels is like the secondary education, like college level, what we call here in the United States college or university level education. It's not so important as to what you studied, as long as you have the minimum requirements as far as hours logged and the appropriate ratings, and that your grades in whatever subject you were in were relatively good. But as far as being the ace on the base, as far as the best in mathematics or sciences or whatever, I don't think it didn't seem to make a difference 25 years ago here in the United States. Now, today it may make a difference. I don't know. In the UK and in Europe and the Middle East, it may make a big difference. The bottom line is, try to do the best you can at whatever it is you're studying. Get whatever the minimum requirements are, the number of hours required, the ratings that are necessary as best you can, and what you can afford. And then, try to just be yourself in an interview. And I was going to say something else and I forgot what it was. But it was good. Trust me. It was going to be really, really sage advice. But I just can't remember what it is now. But perhaps finding out more information. I mentioned in the last episode, Mitch has a website, a blog that he started. He's going through CTC, which is an ab initio training program, a cadet training program in the UK. And he's going to write about what's going on with the training program there in a few months when he starts up, I think in May. You might be able to learn something there, and maybe even contact Mitch and ask him specific questions about the selection process. That would be the way to go. I just hate to give you some bad information about that, because I don't profess to know everything. Trust me, I don't. I don't know everything. I don't know really much of anything. So, sorry I couldn't really help more with that question or questions that you have, Ollie. But I hope that you find what you're looking for. And I understand your desire to fly for a living. That's all you wanted to do. And for the most part, that's true with me as well. So I get where you're coming from. And if you want it badly enough, you'll get it. I'm sure of it. So good luck to you, Ollie. And hey, send me an email and let me know what you found out, because I would really like an answer to this question. And everybody listening might be interested in that as well. All right. So let's move on to Ahmad Dan Hamadou. Ahmad Dan Hamadou. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but I think he's gonna pronounce his own name in his audio feedback. So here, let's take a listen.
Hello, Jeff. This is Ahmad Dan Hamidou from Lagos, Nigeria.
Ahmad Dan Hamidou. There we go.
I just thought I'd try the voice feedback thing for the first time.
Excellent.
And I'm recording this message on my Samsung Galaxy Core GTI 8262 phone. Pretty nice phone, though I have my reservations for it. If you hear any background noise, that would have to be the servers, because I'm in the server room of the organization where I work, IT department. So here's my feedback. I've been thinking about the ultraviolet filtering capabilities of today's fancy sunglasses, the Ray-Ban brand of sunglasses. Filter out harmful ultraviolet rays from the wearer's eyes. And I was wondering, is that technology present in the cockpit windows for airplanes, like the ones you fly, and especially the high-flying airplanes like Gulfstream G5, G550, G650, and the like? I was just wondering, if those airplanes fly so high, there should be some kind of ultraviolet protection for the crew. What do you think about that? I guess that's about it for now. I hope to do more voice feedback. You have a nice day. Blue skies, say blue skies, tailwinds. This is Ahmad, over and out.
Ahmad, thank you so much for that great audio feedback, and hey, keep doing it that way. You mentioned something in your email that you were going to try the SpeakPipe thing, but hey, forget about the SpeakPipe thing. That Samsung Galaxy Core, and then a bunch of letters and numbers. I don't remember exactly what you said there. Good stuff. Good recording quality and great question. Now, do Windows Aviation windscreens have some kind of built-in UV filtering / protection? As far as I know, no. Maybe some of the modern jets, like the 787 and Airbus 350, perhaps they have some kind of a special glass that has some kind of UVA and UVB protection. From what I can tell, just even regular glass, clear glass, actually filters out, I think, most of the UVB, but very little, or some of the UVA, but still the harmful UV does make it through. And I was doing a little bit of research to try to give an accurate answer to your question. And I found an article, I believe it was from the New York Times. Pilots, according to Dr. James Spencer, a member of the board of directors of the American Academy of Dermatology and an expert in skin cancer treatment and cosmetic surgery in St. Petersburg, Florida, was referring to several studies about skin cancers, and he says that basically pilots do have a higher incidence of skin cancer. Why exactly more pilots have skin cancer is not known. For instance, it could be from cosmic radiation, it could be from changing circadian rhythms, or from, say, spending a lot of time outdoors in the places that they fly to. So it's really not, there wasn't a specific study to determine whether or not, we are experiencing higher rates of skin cancer because we are sitting up in that cockpit with a lot of glass and a lot of cosmic radiation, which I believe is the case. And I've mentioned this in a previous episode talking about radiation that we receive, that it depends on, the altitude that you're flying. The higher you fly, the less protection you have against UV radiation. And also it depends on where you are, whether you're closer to the equator or closer to the poles, as to the type of and amount of radiation that you're receiving. And basically, we were receiving a lot as professional airline pilots. The last paragraph that I have clipped here is, but here's what's known. The windows on the planes don't block UVA rays, which are associated with wrinkling, skin aging, and skin cancer. And a higher altitude means stronger ultraviolet rays. The dose of UVA at 20,000 feet is a lot bigger dose than you get on the surface of the Earth. Still, the windows on a plane are small and most people don't fly all that. Because I think this question was a passenger asking about UV radiation, not specifically a question about, pilots. And the windows that we have in the cockpit are much larger than the windows that are in the passenger cabin. So I hope that answers your question. I think it would be a good idea to have some kind of better filtering and protection against UV radiation up there in the cockpit, but as far as I know, no, there is none. If you know otherwise out there, folks, let me know. Okay, here is some audio feedback from Brad Larson.
Captain Jeff, Brad Larson from Phoenix, Arizona again. Thanks again for your awesome podcast. A couple things for you. One, I'm geeking out because on the 17th, I'm going on a flight to U.S. Airways to California from Phoenix, and I haven't been on a plane for a while, so I'm excited about that for some training for a new job. So I'm excited for that. And then I'm sending you a couple of funny airline emails that I got at work the last week or so. And then I had a question about the MD-88, MD-90. Looking at pictures of them, and I noticed that the cockpit glass, there's two windows that are higher than the rest of the main vision, I guess, the one that goes from the side windows all the way across the front to the other side. And then I noticed that there's two windows that are up high, and I just was wondering if there was any particular reason for those. Most airlines that I've seen airliners don't have those. Anyways, just curious if you knew what they were. Are they like, obviously they're not, but they're maybe for ejection seats, or I don't know. Anyways, thanks again. Podcast is awesome, and safe flying. Thanks. Bye.
Well, thank you, Brad, for the question. I'll answer that question first. And those windows are what we refer to as eyebrow windows, because of, if you look at the main windows, they kind of look like eyes, and then the ones that are a little bit higher off to the sides and a little bit higher up are eyebrows, like over your eyes. And the purpose of those, well, long time ago, it used to aid in helping the pilots navigate, because they were using celestial navigation, looking at the stars, and that helped with navigation. But really, I think the main reason for these things is just increased visibility, especially when you're in turns, and trust me, I do look through those eyebrow windows quite a bit in the MD-80 and MD-90 when I'm flying visual approaches, so that when the airplane's banked up, you can kind of look through that eyebrow window and you can see the airport. I think a lot of the airplanes, more modern airplanes, don't really have those anymore because the glass is just so much, the expanse is greater. So you have a lot bigger hole to look out of, so you don't necessarily need that little tiny eyebrow window above. Now, if you look at an MD-80, MD-90, DC-9, Boeing 717, the windows of the cockpit, they're pretty small. They're not huge expanses of glass, and so your visibility is somewhat restricted in that airplane. And so the engineers decided that to help us with seeing things, to add those little eyebrow windows. I like them. I really do. And I actually look through them. Now, some people would say, well, yeah, most of the ones that I see are all blocked up with, trash and newspapers and stuff, to kind of keep the sun out. And yeah, occasionally I'll do that. If you're at cruise altitude, there's really no reason to be looking out your eyebrow window, and there's a lot of sunshine coming through, a lot of cosmic radiation to kind of tie in with the last bit of feedback. But when you're in the terminal area, having that extra visibility could mean the difference between, hitting another airplane or not, and it could mean the difference of, flying a good visual approach pattern and not so great. So that is my answer on the eyebrow windows. But you're right, very few airplanes these days, the modern airplanes, are not putting them in. And in fact, the Boeing 717s initially were manufactured with the eyebrow windows, but then the latest ones to roll off the assembly line, they were completely blocked. They were plugged. And so if you look at the newer models of the 717, they don't have the eyebrow windows at all. In fact, maybe none of them do. I'm not sure. I'll have to pay attention to that. And now, the jokes that were floating around your office or in your email or whatever you said, I'll read one of them. The other one I have mentioned a few times on previous shows, the one about the write-ups. This one says it's from FedEx. Another one I had said from UPS. And you do a little research and you find that it actually, most of this came from logbooks from World War II or something. I don't know. So this thing has been around for a while. And it is very funny. Thank you for sending it, Brad, but I'm not going to read it on this episode if you don't mind. But here is the joke that Brad sent. The Pilot and the Priest. A priest dies and is waiting in line at the pearly gates. Ahead of him is a guy who's dressed in sunglasses, a loud shirt, leather jacket, and jeans. St. Peter addresses this cool guy. Who are you, so that I may know whether or not to admit you to the kingdom of heaven? The guy replies, I'm Jack, retired airline pilot from Houston. St. Peter consults his list. He smiles and says to the pilot, take this silken robe and golden staff and enter the kingdom. The pilot goes into heaven with his robe and staff. Next, it's the priest's turn. He stands erect and booms out, I am Father Bob, pastor of St. Mary's for the last 43 years. St. Peter consults his list. He says to the priest, take this cotton robe and wooden staff and enter the kingdom. Well, just a minute, says the good father. That man was a pilot, and he gets a silken robe and golden staff, and I get only cotton and wood? How can this be? And St. Peter says, well, up here we go by results. When you preached, people slept. When he flew, people prayed. I think I may have actually read this one in the past as well, but it is worth reading again. It is a good chuckle. Thank you, Brad, for sending it. Let's keep moving. My name is Jesse, and I've been interested in aviation since I was 14 when my parents divorced and I flew between St. Louis and Austin to see my parents. Skip forward to today, and I am at Central Texas College, A&M, working towards my ATP. I received my private pilot's license last week and am pushing 50 hours. I'm a novice, I know. I am now working towards the next step, which is my instrument rating. I know that there are a number of your listeners out there who are trying to jump into the aviation world. I would like to recommend Central Texas College, A&M, in Killeen, Texas. The college is great. Many of the graduates have gone off to work for Southwest, my dream job, and many other major airlines. The college is also relatively cheap compared to a lot of flight schools out there. I noticed that you cringe every time someone tells you that they start your podcast over from the beginning. I began listening to your podcast about 4 months ago and am now on episode 68. So, I won't hear your reply to this message for a while, but when I do, it will be a surprise waiting. I would also like to say that I love the long podcast episodes. They are great for my long drive between Austin and Killeen, and I can pause them at any time. I had a few questions for you. Number 1, when a pilot squawks 7700, 7600, 7500, etc., does this show up to the air traffic controller as anything else would, or does it flash out and make itself known as a priority to the controller? Also, how long does it take you from the time you get into the cockpit before the flight to set up everything before you get pushed back? Do you have a mental checklist for short items? If you're ever in Austin, Texas, or St. Louis during the holidays, let me know, and we will have a beer on me. I wish you short ATC delays, high pressure systems, and high ceilings. And then your lifelong fan, Jesse Labate, or Labate. I'm not sure exactly the pronunciation there, Jesse, but thank you for your feedback way back in 68, and we're on 106 right now, so welcome to the future. First of all, the squawking, emergency communication failure, and hijacking. Does this show up to the air traffic controller as anything else, or does it flash? Well, I didn't really know for sure, and I tried to do some research, and I was talking about your question with a co-pilot that I flew with last week or the week before, and I don't remember exactly how he knew this but he did. He said that he had some experience with hanging out in radar facilities and seeing radar scopes and that kind of thing. And he says what happens, and I did find another posting in an aviation forum that talked about this as well. And, well, I'll just read that one. It says, it depends on what type of equipment you have, stars, arts, etc. From what I've seen, this is from a controller, 7600, and the tag goes red. You get an audible warning, and the tag shows RF for radio failure, I guess. The 7500 tag shows HJ, we know what that stands for, and 7700 shows EM for emergency. And and according to the co-pilot I was flying with, he said that not only does the radar scope of let's say you're on approach control and you're squawking emergency, but the center sector also gets that emergency flashing and turning red and a tag if you're in his airspace as well. Even if he's not controlling you, he'll see that as well. So again, I don't know. I don't have any experience with this, so I don't know for sure myself, but based on my co-pilot and this from the Jet Careers forum that I found, it looks like, yeah, it doesn't just stay the way it normally does. It actually does something to get people's attention. So that's good. And then your second question, how long does it take you from the time you get into the cockpit before the flight to set up everything before you get all pushed back? On the airplane I'm flying now, the thing that takes probably the most time is programming the flight management system, putting in all the data, like the fuel weight, the zero fuel weight, the proposed cruise altitude, the temperature at the altitude, the winds at altitude projected, the route of flight, the runway you're using for takeoff, the departure procedure, the departure transition fix, the jetways, and the arrival procedure, all the way down to the approach that you are planning on flying at the airport, your destination airport. Anyway, all that takes time. And then the person not flying is the one that's doing the overhead panel and making sure that the pressurization, the elevation is set properly in the pressurization controller. doing all the every flight. There are certain warning systems that you check, like the fire warning system, the overheat warning system, the cargo fire warning system. Many different things that we check every flight. Some only first flight of the day, and I'd say a very experienced crew, if they're really concentrating and aren't distracted by people coming in and asking them if they want some coffee or, whatever, talking about, whatever. You could probably knock it out within about 10 to 15 minutes. Maybe some could do it a little bit faster, others a little bit longer, but I'd say, you show up to an airplane, it's already loaded with passengers, they're waiting for you. It takes, for the pre-flight, the interior pre-flight or the cockpit pre-flight, you could probably knock it out in about 10 to 15 minutes. Of course, you have to do the exterior inspection as well, so that takes a little bit longer. As far as having shortcuts, checklist, what did you say here? Mental checklist for short items. We use something at Acme, and I think that a lot of airlines do the same. Is the philosophy or flows, where you do a pre-flight checklist flow pattern. You do a before starting the engine checklist flow pattern. You do a after takeoff. I mean, I know I'm skipping some checklists there, but after we take off, there are certain things that we always do. We do the flow, and then we pick up the checklist, and then we read the checklist to make sure that we've accomplished all the items. So the checklist is not a do it when I ask you about it. It's you do it, and then you read the checklist to make sure you've done it, if that makes sense. So yeah, we have published flow patterns, and that's what the boys and girls in the training department expect us to learn and to know and to practice. And it really makes sense. By having a flow pattern, it really makes things flow easier. It's more efficient. And then going back and looking at the checklist and ensuring that all those things are accomplished is a way of making sure you didn't forget something. And so that is my answer to your question. So thanks again, Jesse, for listening, and bless your heart for going back from the beginning. Maybe one more. We'll see. Let's hear some more audio feedback, this time from Bruce.
Hi, Jeff. It's Bruce from Conyers, Georgia, and I have a question about airports and the wind. Recently, I was at a tournament on soccer fields off Camp Creek Parkway, just west of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, and at the beginning of the tournament, the airplanes were taking off to the west, departing right over us. Then there was a shift in the wind, and I noticed after some time airplanes began landing over us into the airport. This made me curious about how they turn the airport around and what the procedure is. I'm curious about how long it takes, and I'm curious about what the method is that they use. Particularly, I'd like to know what you know in the cockpit, if you're aware of it, if they tell you that they're turning the airport around, or if you just figure it out from the approach procedure assignments, the clearances that you're given. So anyway, I just would like your thoughts or what information you have about this. Also, I'd like to say thanks for a great podcast. It's really a pleasure to listen to you. As a GA pilot, I really enjoy learning about the world in which you live and fly. And just want to say thanks so much for all of your hard work. It's really a great contribution to the rest of us. Thanks a lot, Jeff. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you, Bruce. Great audio feedback. And without you, and I've said this many times, not you specifically, Bruce, but you're included in that group of people that listen to my show. Obviously, this wouldn't be much of a show if no one was listening to it. And more importantly, contributing to the show by asking me questions. So it's definitely a two-way street here. So thank you, Bruce, for sending in the great question. Now let's move on. No, I'm just kidding. Let's answer Bruce's question. Okay, so, turning the airport around, in other words, going from, let's say, in Atlanta, taking off and landing to the east, and then switching around, taking off and landing to the west. And how long does it take? Well, it really depends. It depends on the time of day. If it's the time of day where the traffic is not very, it's not busy, then it doesn't take so long. If it's the time of day where you have quite a bit of traffic taking off and landing, it takes longer, because what they have to do is they have to, and I don't know the specific ATC procedures, probably somebody listening who is an ATC person would be best to answer this, but I imagine that it has something to do with, okay, the winds are shifting around. We need to change, the airport operation from this direction to this direction. We have X number of airplanes that are already in the line or in the queue coming in for approach to that runway. At some point, they probably just have to say, Acme Flight 403 will be the last one landing on runway 27 left. And, AirTran Flight 413, whatever, is going to be the last one for this runway. And so I'm sure that there's somebody has to draw the line somewhere, say this is the last person. Maybe there's a natural break already, and it just works out. Perhaps they'd have to, the next person in line, or the first person for the new operation or new landing configuration, perhaps they have to slow them down considerably, perhaps even issue holding pattern instructions and have them hold, one or two turns in the pattern to allow this whole process to take place. So that's what I'm imagining is probably going to happen. On the ground, now you have all these airplanes that are requesting taxi for takeoff, and at some point they're going to say, okay, the last one off this ramp is it for this runway, and now we're going to start directing the flow of traffic to the opposite end of the airport for the new runway configuration. And so there's probably a certain amount of time there where everybody that's trying to get out and take off, just like hold on, stay where you are until we clear up all the traffic that's going the other direction. And then the green light is given for the new flow taxiing out to the new takeoff runways. And then after the last one lands on the old direction and nobody's coming in, then they start the new operation with takeoffs going the other direction, and the person that's first in line out there either holding or getting vectored comes in and gets vectored around for the new landing. And again, exact time frame, I would just guess it probably takes anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. Again, I'm just pulling that out of my hat. I have no idea, actually. So how would we know about it? Well, the first clue that we usually get is when we notice that the observed winds don't really jive with the present runway configuration. And it'll be like, they're still using 27, but the winds are now not from the west. They're kind of coming more out of the east. And at a certain point, they're going to be so strong out of the east that it's going to be a tailwind that exceeds our maximum tailwind operation parameters. So that's the first clue. Like, that's interesting that the winds are now, it's mostly a tailwind that people are taking off and landing with. So that's usually the first time or the first inkling that you have that maybe they're going to be changing things. Secondly is when you're coming in and you are expecting your arrival fix. Let's say coming into Atlanta, they're about 40 miles from the airport. And if you're landing in one direction, you're kind of expecting a certain altitude and a certain speed. And if you're landing in the other direction, you're expecting a different altitude and a different speed. And so when you notice that the clearance you're given is different, or maybe the clearance that people ahead of you are getting is different than what you had anticipated, that should be another little flag going off in your head. Wait a minute. Why are they giving dirty at 12,250 when I thought that we'd be crossing dirty intersection at 14,000? So that's a little clue right there. Then another clue is when the controller tells you to pick up the new ATIS information. Let's say the automatic terminal information service you have is still pretty new, and you check in with that identifier and they say, pick up the next letter identifier. And you go, okay. That's odd. So when you listen to the new automated terminal information service broadcast, then they tell you the new runway configuration. Then it's pretty much confirmed that they are turning the airport around. And then you change all the stuff you have in your flight management system computer box and rebrief the approach for the new runway that they're using, etc. So, and then sometimes you may be advised to fly slower or to expect holding. So that is what we usually encounter when we're having an airport being turned around, so to speak. And it's pretty straightforward at airports such as Atlanta, Dallas, where the primary operations are one direction or 180 degrees from that direction. Things are a little bit different in airports like Chicago O'Hare, where it seems like they're always changing. I think they have a runway for about every direction of the compass up there. I mean, it's just amazing. The converging runway takeoffs and landings and everything else is just pretty amazing. I don't know how they keep everything straight. And sometimes they don't. But anyway, thanks, Bruce, for your great question. And I'm going to, I think I can do one more here. Tim writes, sorry for leaving another feedback, but I did want to share a relatively recent event with you from last August. My wife and I were returning to San Francisco from Virginia via Atlanta during the huge wildfire dubbed the Rim Fire at Yosemite National Park and the surrounding area. We were scheduled to vacation in the area in September. I know from previous camping trips that the airline's flight paths many times traverse this area. I could tell by the onboard flight tracker that we would more than likely get an early evening view of this catastrophe. I had my Canon D60 SLR ready and asked the flight attendant if the fire was on the opposite side of the aircraft that I would like to get some shots. Luckily, it was on my side. Just as we approached the conflagration, the captain came on the intercom to let the passengers know of this momentous event. The sight was spectacular and ominous. The smoke covered almost all that was visible and flowing north with the wind on the eastern side of the Sierras. The orange glow clearly visible for many miles. I got some awesome photos which made it a little easier to realize our annual vacation to the Strawberry Music Festival in this area would not be realized. The area will take an eon to recover. What can you share with your listeners of things of note that you have witnessed from your front row seat? Thanks, Tim. Well, I had to think about that a little bit, Tim. And I'm sure that I've experienced more than this, but just off the top of my head, I tried to think back of some of the amazing or spectacular things that I've been able to witness from my front row seat, as you say. Flying the L-1011 out to the Hawaiian Islands, a few times I got a chance to see some volcanic eruptions off the Big Island of Hawaii. Let's see, I've seen Niagara Falls from relatively close up. Yosemite, again, you mentioned the rim fire at Yosemite. It's not unusual at all for us to, well, back in the day when I flew the 727 out of Fresno to Reno on the way to Salt Lake City, we would ask if we could do a slow climb out of Fresno up toward Reno, and you pass right over the Yosemite area. And that's kind of cool to have a nice low altitude view of Half Dome and some of the other features of the Yosemite Valley. That's pretty spectacular, as you know. I've seen some pretty nice views of the Grand Canyon over the years, going back and forth between East Coast and West Coast. Not so much with Acme, but when I used to fly in the Air Force, we'd get a chance to go up in the higher latitudes, especially up in Alaska and the Bering Sea and Bering Straits and that kind of thing. When you get up in those latitudes, it's not unusual if you're flying at night, and I flew a lot at night, to see the Aurora Borealis, the Northern Lights, and that is just amazing to see. Sometimes they're kind of faint, and other times they're just very bright and very spectacular. And if you look up at them, it's like you almost feel dizzy by looking at them. And last thing I have here is, it was exciting to me because the first time that I'd flown over, left the continent, the United States, or the North American continent, and headed over to the UK and Europe, crossing the channel. I couldn't think of what it was. Seeing the White Cliffs of Dover, that was pretty impressive. So those were just a few things that I jotted down, some memories of some of the things that I've had a chance to see. I'm sure I've witnessed much more than that. It's just that that's all I can think of right offhand. So thank you for sharing that with us, Tim. And when we start I'm going to finish with David. David wrote in, he actually left this in the episode 103 comment section on the website. And I guess it was we were talking about why, I think, was it Nick or somebody sent in some feedback asking why it was that some airplanes start off as the 757-200 and there never was a 757-100. Why is that? Well, I tried to answer the question, and I'm not sure how well I did with that, but David apparently knows a lot about this, and he gave a very detailed explanation in the comment section of 103, and he talks about, I'll just start off I'll just read a little bit of what he said here, but if you want to see it all, go to, again, the comment section of episode 103, and if I can figure out a way to link to that, I will. Here's the lowdown on Boeing aircraft series numbers. Each aircraft from the 707 to the 767 has a 3-digit number after it. The 707 is a -100, -200, -300, -400. The 727 can be a -100 or -200. The 200 is what I flew. The 737, he puts, an amazing aircraft, can be any number from 100 to 900. The 747 is 100, 200, 300, 400, or 8. Not 800. Boeing has changed its numbering system. The 757 is either a 200 or 300. As you mentioned, the 100 was never ordered, so it never flew. And so it goes on as to why it is that some of these things are named the way they are, and also the fact that there is such a thing called the Boeing customer code. And then he has a Wikipedia link to Boeing customer codes. As an example, the 727, I'll just pick one company that he uses as an example, Delta Airlines. The company code is 32, so the 200 series 727s that they were flying were actually considered the 727-232s because the 727-2 meant the 200 series. The 32 meant those were specifically ordered by Delta Airlines and built to their specifications. So great treatment there, sir, on the Boeing series numbers, and a little bit of the DC series, like the DC-8s, and that's it. So we're going to stop there for now, and I'm going to go walk over to the Brick House Tavern and Tap, and hopefully meet up with some of you who listened to my show. And until we meet again, either tonight, tomorrow, Thursday, or whenever, don't go anywhere, okay? Promise me. Hello and welcome back. And yes, I'm back, and it's not Tuesday, it's Wednesday, and I'm back in the same room that I was in yesterday. I left this morning early, flew to John F. Kennedy International in New York, and then back here to Orlando. And now I'm back in the same exact room I was in yesterday. And I am now going to, hopefully, finish recording episode 106. And I'm going to meet with my son later on tonight. We're going to go to one of those Brazilian, what is it called? Churrascaria? I know I have Brazilian listeners here, and they're probably yelling right now. It's a Brazilian steakhouse, and never been to one myself, and neither has my son. So I told him not to eat very much because, there's going to be lots of good stuff to eat there. So I need to move on with this. So last night I stopped recording. Yesterday afternoon I stopped recording because I said I had to get over to the Brick House Tavern and Tap, and walked over there and arrived just before 5 o'clock. And outside, standing there outside, lonely as could be, was Mike, and Mike Cochran, I believe. And he said, "Captain Jeff?" And I said, "Yeah. What makes you think that? How did you recognize me?" And so we introduced each other, or he introduced himself to me, and we went inside, found a table. Wasn't sure if it was just going to be Mike and I, or more were going to show up. And guess what? More folks did show up. A total of 4 came out to talk aviation with me. So I'll put a photo of us in the show notes if you want to check out our little meetup. And I brought my H2 recorder, the one that I'm using right now to record this podcast, and recorded a little snippet just so that you can kind of get an idea of what it was like at the Brick House Tavern and Tap last night.
Hey there. We're at the Orlando Airline Pilot Guy meetup, and I really thought that I was going to be the only one here. And then I was pleasantly surprised when I saw Mike out front as I walked up. We're at the Brick House Tavern and Tap, and I hope that you can hear me because it's really noisy in here. But we're sitting at this table. We got Mike, we have Ryan, David, Fred, and we have people from all over Florida and San Francisco. I mean, I am so popular that somebody actually came all the way from San Francisco to Orlando, Florida to meet up with me. That really stokes my ego. It really does. So anyway, so we're sitting here at the table, and we're talking aviation and all kinds of, I don't know. We're just having fun, eating some snacks and drinking some drinks, and so I don't know. You guys want to say anything for anybody listening? No, they don't. They don't want to say
We're
anything.
all camera shy now. Got stage fright.
We can all talk at the same time. That way you don't feel. Oh well, but that's okay. They don't have to say anything because I want to say that I'm really, really thrilled to meet you all in person because I know that there are a bunch of people listening. I don't see you. I hear from you occasionally with feedback and everything else. It's always a lot of fun for me and rewarding to see you face to face, and in physical, real life.
So let's interview you a little bit. This is David.
Oh, okay.
So we asked you the question that you didn't think anybody was going to listen, but then it turned out you have about 8,000 downloads for each show. What's your feeling now that so many people are interested in what you have to say, or so much feedback all the time?
Oh, I'm thinking that there are a lot of really sad people out there. No, it's very. I don't know what the word is. Humbling, yeah, thank you. It's very humbling to know that so many people listen to me, and it really makes me take this more serious. Makes me.
People are interested in your and stuff.
Almost as much as my wife is. Yeah, she says, "You mean somebody will actually sit down and listen to you for 2 hours at a time?"
Drive.
I said, "Yeah."
Make a night out, come from different counties.
Yeah, well, they must really not know you then. Thanks, honey. But no, I really, thanks for coming out. It's been a real pleasure. I hope to do this in more places around the country, wherever I'm laying over. It's always edifying to meet real people and put a face behind all the people that are listening to me. So. If you have anything else to say, I'm going to turn it off. Okay. They don't want to say anything. I understand. Okay. Not everybody can be a ham like me. Okay. Take care.
So it's really kind of funny when I bring these recorders and then I hit the record button and everybody just clams up. I mean, everybody was talking, great conversations going on, and then I bring out this little H2 recorder and hit the record button and everybody's just like, nothing. except for David. That was the voice you heard there. So thanks again, everybody, Fred, David, Ryan, Mike, for coming out last night. It was a lot of fun. And thanks for the treat. They picked up my part of the bill, so I was very appreciative of that. And so let's move on to something else here. Oh, I just received this feedback today from Antoine, and it regards the last episode when we were talking about the Ethiopian Airlines jet that was hijacked by the co-pilot, and made the remark that it was hard for me to believe that the Swiss Army, the Swiss fighter jets, did not operate during the night or the weekends. And so in response to that, Antoine says, "It is sadly true that the air policing missions fulfilled by the Swiss Army are only done on weekdays from 8 a.m. to noon and from 1:30 to 5. I once lived right next to the military radar in Dubendorf near Zurich and can confirm that the radar even stops rotating outside of these hours, which of course means that it is completely inoperative. There have been many attempts by the Swiss Army to upgrade the service to a 24/7 operation, but they have always been met with budget cuts. There is currently a debate regarding the replacement of the very old and obsolete fleet of F-5 Tiger planes. It has been going on for years and years, with the budget for the purchase even being attributed. The irony of it is that despite the budget being attributed, the actual purchase of the replacement, the Saab Gripen E/F, needs to be approved separately by the Swiss people. The vote is scheduled to take place on May 18th, and preliminary polls don't look too good. Nonetheless, the Swiss have an agreement with neighboring countries such as France to handle these cases of airliner hijacking, as was put into action for the Ethiopian flight. In this case, the fighters are not allowed to open fire, but they fulfilled their role of escorting the airliner to its new destination safely. Switzerland is a beautiful and peaceful country full of such subtleties, which is why I think many appreciate about it, although it does lead to such odd situations. I wish you blue skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds, Antoine. And thanks, Antoine, for shedding some more light on that. And yes, Switzerland, I only got a chance to see a little bit of Switzerland many, many years ago. And from what I did see, it was a very beautiful country and beautiful people. And, I completely understand that. And all the countries over there are so close, and you have agreements with other countries, so not a big deal. It's just that I just thought it was odd, and as I think you agree, that it is odd, but that's one of the pleasant things sometimes about that beautiful country of Switzerland. So thank you, Antoine, for sending the feedback and making some clarifications about that. And let's see. Whoa, what's that? Oh, we have some breaking news here. Yep. Let me see. Breaking news. Fort Worth, Texas, explaining that the costs of, let's see, the headline here is American Airlines to phase out complimentary cabin pressurization. Fort Worth, Texas, explaining that the cost of the service have grown too high in recent years. American Airlines announced Tuesday that it will no longer offer free cabin pressurization to passengers starting March 15th. Unfortunately, to stay competitive as a legacy carrier in today's air travel market, it no longer makes economic sense for us to provide breathable air at altitude, said American Airlines CEO Doug Parker, noting that despite the cutbacks, air pressurization would still be available to first and business class travelers, as well as those willing to pay an additional fee. While we regret any altitude sickness, blood problems, dimmed vision, or hyperventilation that may result from air pressure less than a third of the normal levels, we remind our passengers that such effects will diminish as soon as the aircraft descends below 10,000 feet. Parker added that the company is also planning to discontinue complimentary landing gear on flights under 4 hours. And yes, as you all suspect, and many of you sent me links to this little fake article by The Onion, which is a satire magazine or news magazine, or now website as well. that puts out these fake stories, and it's a very, very funny thing. And thank you for sending that to me, and I enjoyed a great chuckle from it, and I'm hoping that you did too. So, no, American Airlines is not going to stop complimentary cabin pressurization because, as we all know, if you don't have cabin pressurization and you're up at altitudes, not only do you have dimmed vision and get sleepy and all the other symptoms they talked about here, but you actually will die. So, not real, not true, just some fun. Okay, let's get on with some of your feedback, and I'm trying to stall because I'm trying to get my player here and do something like this. All right, Jacob Schumann, he writes, I got hooked into aviation some years ago when I had the possibility to jump on a plane in New Zealand and did an adventure called You Fly. They put you in a tiny little plane, and once you're in the area, you get control, more or less, the same thing you do in your very first private pilot lesson. After coming back to Austria, I started my PPL and finally got it last year in September, so I am quite a newcomer still in general aviation. Now I try to work out my way around the Austrian airspace. I just have been on a wonderful trip to New Zealand, which I really love in terms of the people and the landscape. And I have a short question. I went there with Emirates. The A380 is great, but 14 hours in the economy class is still such a long flight. And noticed that even in the security video clip, they advertised the use of mobile phones during the flight. I know that it has been quite a debate whether to allow these devices on board a plane or not, but it seems that on board of an Emirates flight, this is already possible. They point out that mobile phones can only be used on certain flights over certain areas. So I wondered, is the country you fly over that has to allow the usage of mobile phones, or is it up to the airline to allow it? How does it work? Who has the right to allow or forbid the use of these devices? I tried to turn on my phone, but besides the data coverage, wireless LAN, I got no network coverage on the flight between Dubai and Australia, where it should have been possible. And so I did a little research, Jacob, and found a couple different things. Emirates Airlines has announced that passengers on their A380, this is some time ago, will now be able to make mobile phone calls thanks to their on-air, that's O-N-A-I-R, Wi-Fi technology. Prior to that, emails and text messaging were possible via Emirates, but phone calls were not due to the rather clunky satellite system that was used at the time. On Air is expecting to change that and will now allow passengers to make calls during flights using their mobile devices. However, calls are not allowed to be made within 250 miles of the United States due to FAA rules. That may change, but it is certainly a step in the right direction. On Air's onboard system is based on a Wi-Fi access point and or a GSM picocell connected to the ground through a satellite link. All onboard equipment, except for the satellite antenna, fits into a hand luggage compartment. Mobile On Air is a cell phone service which offers mobile telephony, SMS, and narrowband internet access at 56 kilobytes per second, or kilobits per second, that is, and so allows passengers to make and receive calls on their mobile phones, send and receive text messages and emails, and use the internet. Airlines can restrict usage of these services at discretion, enabling them to ban voice calls and allow only SMS and internet access instead. Lufthansa is one airline following this restrictive approach due to the passengers' alleged desire for quiet during flights. And that was from the wikipedia.org article on air telecommunications. So now I ended up getting from AT&T when I was an I still am an AT&T subscriber. I went in for something, one of the phones for my kids or something like that, and they said, they were looking at my account, and they said, well, you qualify, Mr. Nielsen, for the the AT&T, and I forgot what they call it, but it's one of these GSM pico cells, which basically is like a cellular antenna that you see, outside on the big poles, sometimes disguised as trees, and sometimes they put them inside of steeples of churches and that kind of thing. But you know what I'm talking about, the cell phone antennas. They offer these like little miniature ones, that's what they call them, Pico, P-I-C-O cells, that you can connect to your Wi-Fi router at home, as long as you can get the thing somewhere near a window, near the exterior of the house. And what it does, and I never hooked mine up, but what it allows is a really, really clear signal for your GSM phone. And what it does is it's you're using the GSM through the Wi-Fi system. So this little device, when I think about it, I should hook that up, because I've had now a cable internet service for a while, which doesn't have a narrow bandwidth cap, and it's pretty good bandwidth, and maybe I should try to connect that thing and see, because the service when I'm down in my basement with my cell phone is not very good. A lot of times people say they can't hear me very well, and then sometimes the calls drop, etc. So anyway, I have one of those little Pico cells myself at home. I just haven't hooked it up yet. So apparently the on-air system uses these Pico cells inside the airplane and then connects it through their on-board satellite system. And that's how you can actually make GSM phone calls. Now, Jacob said that he tried to use it, and he didn't get any network coverage, and it should have been possible. At first I was thinking, well, maybe it wasn't a GSM phone, but if you're living in Austria and New Zealand, chances are, it's pretty much the world standard, the GSM standard. Here in the United States, GSM is a big chunk of the cellular traffic, but Sprint and Verizon use a different technology, TDMA and CDMA, which is not the same as GSM. So I thought maybe you had that type of phone or that type of technology, but I don't know. I'm not sure why it didn't work for you, Jacob. And apparently the people that decide whether or not to allow the use of these devices, well, a couple different levels. Here in the United States, so far, the FAA and the FCC haven't authorized the use of cell phones on board flights inside the U.S. territories. But I think, as I said, that's going to change. And then they're probably going to leave it up to the individual airline whether or not they're going to offer that service. So we'll see what happens. So good question, Jacob. Thanks for listening. And if we get any more clarification on that, we'll certainly let you know. Now, Mark Van Ram writes, Jeff, you mentioned flying over the Chesapeake Bay and seeing spotter planes. They might have been spotters for menhaden fish. These fish are an oily, bony fish that are not for eating. They use the fish oil for cosmetics, fish oil supplements, etc. Reedville, Virginia, where the menhaden fleets are located, was once the richest town in the United States in the early 1900s. Wow, never even heard of Reedville. I was talking about, somebody had asked a question about what other things can you use a commercial license for or with. And I thought I did mention crop dusting, but Mark said that he didn't think I mentioned that. So yeah, crop dusting, another use for a commercial license, because you're up there, you're working, you're getting paid, right? That's commercial. So thanks, Mark Van Ram, for your feedback, as always. Dave writes, I've come across a very compelling but difficult story via the Ace Abbott podcast, and then he has an iTunes link to the Ace Abbott podcast, or maybe I put that in there, which I believe was your recommendation. The story is of Captain Joe Townsend, who overcame the loss of his family in an air crash. He is promoting his book of the story. I, and I'm sure all of your listeners, would love to hear you interview Captain Townsend, if such is your cup of tea. Well, I don't know why I should do that. Dave, because Ace Abbott did a really good job of interviewing him, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes. Also, I meant to express my appreciation of your story of Georgia Tech to Auburn and its honesty. Mine is a tad similar. RPI, is Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, I believe, in Troy, New York, with the intent of an airline pilot career to, well, eventually teacher of math, then now teacher of English as a second language. For me, being observed is my once-a-year equivalent to your simulator check ride, I imagine, but the observers don't throw erasers at us, etc. I guess the equivalent of having some kind of an emergency, right? 2 very tiny feedback questions, which can be relegated to the bin of none of my business with no problem, if you like. The first is brought on by a neighbor who is a paratrooper, but now afraid to climb a ladder to the second-story level, and ditto me, but not the paratrooper part. The question, can and do pilots suffer from fear of heights, fear of ladders? And the second question, I think, talked about by Chuck Yeager, or was it Ernie Gann, who admitted to suffering from air sickness. Can and do pilots suffer from air sickness? Can or do they talk about it? Sometimes I would get sick in my private pilot training days many moons ago. Again, please disregard it. These are none of my business sort. No, I have no problem at all, Dave, answering these things. And fear of heights is formally known as acrophobia, and it's not unusual for pilots to have a fear of heights. Now you're thinking to yourself, huh? How can that be? How can somebody, for their living, fly in airplanes which are at incredible heights, have a fear of heights and still be able to work like that? Well, fear of heights, and one of my very, very good friends, Ken, suffers from acrophobia, but it's only when the height that he's on, like he's peering over a balcony, or he's on a tall tower, or a something that's connected to the ground. When it's connected to the ground, that's when he gets this feeling of dizziness and this fear of falling. But if you're in an airplane, you don't have that connection between you and the ground, and for some reason your brain goes, oh, I'm okay with this. There's no connection there. I don't have any fear or anxiety or apprehension. So it's kind of weird. And I think I mentioned earlier, I don't know if it was in this I think it was earlier in this podcast, when somebody was asking me about some of the things that I've seen in my time at my office window that were spectacular. And one of the things was the Aurora Borealis, the Northern Lights. And I think I mentioned that, at night and seeing these Aurora Borealis things, or, the phenomenon, I felt dizzy. It was like I was looking at it thinking, oh, I'm going to fall. It was doing something to my head. And that doesn't, of course, mean that I have a fear. But I have, if I'm on a tall building or a ladder and I look down, or on a balcony, I don't really have a fear, but I do kind of sometimes go, whoa, that's kind of high up here. But so yeah, it's not unusual at all for pilots to have suffer from acrophobia. And the second question about air sickness, and I did a little bit of searching, and I found a couple little morsels. Bob Hoover, many of us know about Bob Hoover. He's a famous air show pilot. Gets sick when someone else flies the plane. He has to fly himself. Ever heard of Chuck Yeager? He broke the sound barrier back in 1945. He got sick the first time he tried to ride in a plane. And also, for what it's worth, the famous German fighter pilot Werner Mulders got horribly airsick during his training, but he persevered and overcame it, and went on to become one of Germany's top aces during both the Spanish Civil War and World War II. And you know what? Honestly, almost everybody that goes up to fly for the first time either feels a little nauseated and perhaps doesn't actually get sick. I felt nauseated, but I didn't actually throw up. And then others feel nauseated and throw up, get airsick. And it's just something I think that your that your brain finally overcomes. I mentioned last night, talking to some of the guys that came out for the meetup, that it used to be that, or maybe it was somebody else I was talking with, but regardless, I used to not be able to look at my cell phone and look at emails and read stuff on my cell phone while I was in the van going to and from the airport and the hotel, because it just started making me feel nauseated. And after time, apparently my brain just finally adapted to it, and now, I can do it without a problem. I'm going back and forth in the train and the bus and the van, and I'm looking at my phone and reading things, and it doesn't bother me at all. So I think it's just something that you adapt to. I think another thing that causes air sickness, especially if you're in pilot training, is the fact that you have this a double whammy. You have that motion sickness aspect of it, and you also have that aspect of somebody putting a lot of pressure, or maybe you're putting pressure on yourself to perform, and that anxiety and that pressure and apprehension that you're feeling to perform, and then coupling that with the motion aspect of the thing, sometimes results in that feeling of nausea, and sometimes actually physically getting sick. So, not unusual. So if you're out there and you're starting to fly and you're feeling a little nauseated and you're thinking that I can't be a pilot because of that, well, don't worry. Almost everybody outgrows that and feels fine after a while. Tom Frundel, I think, writes, I saw this little post on Reddit about the pilot shortage. Interesting observations, and I thought you may like it. And then he gave me a link to this thread in Reddit, Reddit, R-E-D-D-I-T, and I thought that I had clipped that, but apparently I haven't, so I'm now pulling it up, and it's a link to a Business Week article about, yes, there's a pilot shortage, and they have a discussion about the possibility of a pilot shortage, and then they were discussing also the shortage of pay and benefits, which, of course, we talked about earlier. And so I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll include this link in the show notes, and you can follow the thread as well. Some good stuff in there. So thank you, Tom. Brian writes, I have two questions for you, both relating to aircrew pay. Number one, is a captain's or first officer's pay impacted by the type of plane that they fly? For example, all other things being equal, experience, seniority, etc., would a 747 pilot get paid more than a 737 pilot, given that they are flying a bigger plane with more passengers? So I'll answer that first. In general, I'd say yes, it's true, but it really depends. It depends on your airline and the way the pay is structured. Most airlines here in the United States have our pay is based on the airplane, and in general, the bigger the airplane or the more passengers it carries, the more the hourly rate is higher, and then the first officer gets a percentage of the captain's pay, and at Acme, it's roughly 2/3 of the captain's hourly rate. So if the captain is making $150 an hour on a particular airplane, and the first officer would get approximately $100 per hour. It also, there's something factored in, longevity. So you have hourly pay rates for each of the airplanes for both captains and first officers, and then, year 1, year 2, year 3, all the way through at Acme year 12. That's where it tops out. So, you have to look at how long you've been with the airline as well as the equipment that you're flying on. Now, some airlines have a system where they have a captain's rate for narrow bodies and a captain's rate for wide bodies, and still others have pay rates based completely on basically longevity and seniority. So, for instance, I don't know if this is still true, but I remember years ago in Atlanta, I was pre-flighting an airplane, I think the L-1011, And on frequency, at that time, we were sharing the ramp with British Airways. And the Speedbird flight was talking on the radio, and the voices sounded really young to me. And I made some kind of a comment about how young the voices sounded. And I think the captain told me, oh, he said, well, they have a system where you get paid not on what you fly, the size of the airplane, but how long you've been with the company. And so, in fact, at British Airways, and again, this is just based on what he said. I don't know if this is really true, so don't get upset with me if I'm not right about this. But he said, whatever this, we'll just say this hypothetical airline, the senior captains are not flying the overseas flights because that's a young person's game, and it really is. We've talked about, Renato sent in some feedback about how these long-haul flights really age you quite a bit, going through all the different time zones and messing up your circadian rhythm, etc. And so the irony is that many of the airlines here in the U.S. and other parts of the world, the most senior people are the ones flying those kind of trips, when in fact it should be the younger people, the junior people should be flying these overseas trips, because they probably would be able to withstand the circadian rhythm disruptions and the all the time zone changes and the jet lag and everything much better than the old folks. So, according to this captain, he said that British Airways, the older guys, are the ones flying in country, and at the time they were flying 737s, just doing domestic operations, and being home almost every night, and letting the young people do all that long haul stuff, which really makes a lot of sense. But at Acme and most of the other major legacy airlines, or all the major legacy airlines here in the United States, and many of the major and even not so major airlines in the U.S., it's a seniority-based system, and kind of using that old formula about whatever the size of the airplane is, and the carrying capacity, and the speed, and gross weight, and all these other things that are factored in to come up with this magic pay rate. And that's just the way it works. Okay, number 2. There has been a lot written lately about the pilot shortage, and many of these articles mention the appalling pay of regional first officers when they are just getting started. As a frequent flyer, it gets me thinking about how I can help to make things better for these highly trained professionals who surely deserve to be paid better than taxi drivers or fast food workers. I would certainly be willing to pay a little bit more for my tickets with the knowledge that the flight crew were being fairly compensated. However, business being business, I worry that if ticket prices were raised to justify paying flight crews better, that only a small portion of the increase would actually go to their salaries. I think you're right. This got me to thinking, would you consider inappropriate if I offered a tip to my flight crew at the end of a flight? Are you aware of any airlines, or if any airlines, for example Acme, have policies against flight crews accepting tips from passengers? I know it might seem like a small gesture to offer the flight crew $20 or something at the end of the flight, but if a few passengers on each flight did it, it might make a big difference to somebody barely making ends meet. Let me know next time you're in Denver, and I would be happy to take you out for a beer or for an aerial tour of the city in a Cessna 172. Cheers, Brian. Well, thanks, Brian, for the offer. No, I don't think that Acme has any policies that I know about anyway, about not accepting tips. I think that one time I did, pretty much as a joke, but if somebody had put some money in the tip cup that I was holding, I would not have given it back. But I got one of the styrofoam cups, one of the what they call pilot cups, and got a little what is it called? Marker, permanent marker. I can't think of the name of it right now. And don't send me feedback telling me what the name of it is. I'll remember it as soon as I finish this. Sharpie, that's it. I remembered it now. A Sharpie, and I wrote tips. And because the first officer and I were talking about why is it that you go to a place like Starbucks or some coffee shop, and the people really aren't doing anything but their job and ringing you up at the cash register and handing you a cup of coffee. Why is it that they somehow deserve to get a tip? I don't know, so we were kind of talking about that and saying, we're doing a lot more than that. We're actually providing, some skilled aviation services to the passengers, and don't you think we should, get a tip? And I'm thinking, yeah, I think we should. So I got the Sharpie out and put tips on my little styrofoam cup, and I stood by the door, and I was holding it, and everybody just laughed. They thought I was joking. And I really was, pretty much. But again, as I said, I wouldn't have minded if somebody had given me a tip. And hey, by the way, I have a tip jar, a virtual tip jar, the coffee fund. Right? So, well, anyway. Where was I going with that? I do remember one time I was making a PA, and I was joking, and I said that, that tips and gifts to the pilot crew was encouraged. And again, I was saying it tongue-in-cheek, but one of the people that got off the airplane handed me a Starbucks, prepaid Starbucks card, and he said, "Here you go." He said, "Somebody gave this to me. I don't drink coffee, so here, have it." And I said, no, I was just joking, and I was trying to give it back to him. He goes, no, really, keep it. I went, okay, that's cool. And so I didn't know how much was on the card until I went to a Starbucks to buy some coffee, and it was like a $20, $25 card. And I'm thinking, score, that was great. But I don't know. Maybe some folks listening can chime in on this, and I'm sure we're going to get the gamut from, oh, this is offensive for you even to consider accepting a tip because you're a professional. And I could see that point of view. And others would say, hey, you're doing more than the person at the coffee shop, just handing you a cup of coffee and ringing you up, swiping your card. So why not? So I'm sure we'll get all kinds of responses on that. But I don't have a problem with it. If you want to, especially for the regional airlines and the first officers, if you can figure out which one's the first officer, giving them a tip might be a really not only a pleasure for him, but it may be something that is almost a necessity. So love to hear your thinking about that, Brian, and everybody else out there. Thanks for your questions, and let's move on, shall we? Let's move on by doing one of these little things that some of you like and some of you don't, like this. Oh, did you hear that? That was playing from my computer speakers. And if I'd had it set up appropriately, it would have sounded like this. Yeah, now you can hear it better. Okay. A-M-I-R-E. Amire? Amire? I think. Writes, hi, Captain Jeff. I was wondering, how many languages do you know, and how important is language in this line of career? Okay. I sort of know one language. A lot of the Brits would say, no, you don't. You speak a bastardized version of English, not the Queen's English, but an American style of English. That's what I speak, and that's the only language that I know. Now, I know some very, very elementary words in a few different languages, but I cannot carry on a conversation in any language other than English, and sometimes that's difficult for me as well. I am so blessed that the international language of aviation is English, because that happens to be my native language. How important is language? Well, I would say that the most important thing is for you to know English in addition to whatever your native language is, because if you're going to do this career, English is the international language of aviation, as I just mentioned. It would be practical and convenient and other adjectives for you to know more than just English, especially if you travel internationally. That way you'd have better times in the countries that you're visiting if you know their language, but it's not necessarily necessary. But language, I think more than a particular language other than English being important is being able to communicate, and communicate in whatever language you can communicate in. As I've mentioned many, many times on this show, I believe that the reason that a lot of things happen, like incidents and accidents, is in large part due to a lack of communication, or somehow communication has been stilted in some way or degraded in some way. So it's a great question. I don't know. If you're thinking out there, you're listening, that I didn't do that question service by my answer, please help me out. What your thoughts are regarding language and how important it is in the job of a pilot. So, speaking of language, Andrew is going to use language to communicate this to us via his audio feedback.
Hello, Captain Jeff. This is Andrew, or Mr. Dom74 from Twitter. Now, about the window shades and bigger windows that passengers are saying it would be nicer if the windows were bigger. I love actually looking out through the window throughout the flight, having a look at the cloudscape, the wings, and everything that's going on outside. However, a number of times, including a few times on a Lufthansa flight, I was actually asked by a flight attendant, even though it was daytime, to close my shade immediately. I found that a bit sort of unusual, couldn't really explain why, and when I asked them, they just said that it is an instruction that they've been given and I am to close my window shade, thank you, which is a bit strange. Anyway, just wondering whether there may be a reason for flight attendants to ask passengers to keep the window shade closed at different times. Anyway, great show, really enjoyed the latest episode. All the best, and I hope to hear some feedback about my question. All the best.
Well, thank you, Andrew. And not only was it kind of unusual or uncommon for that instruction, but I think it was kind of rude, the way at least you stated it. At least what the flight attendant said. Well, this is an instruction that I've given you, and you better darn well follow my instruction. The only thing I can think of is that sometimes they ask, the flight attendants will ask passengers to lower their window shades at least halfway, because many people are trying to watch the movie, and especially important back in the old days when you actually had the screens and the projectors showing the movies on the screens, and if you didn't have almost pitch black, it was hard to see those. But of course nowadays everybody's using individual monitors and screens. But I think that they sometimes request that passengers lower their window shades a bit at least, so that it makes it easier for everybody to see their personal entertainment systems. That's the only thing I can think of for people saying we want you to close your window. I'm thinking, hey, if I'm sitting next to the window, that's my window, I don't want to be a jerk about it, but I can see them saying, I want you to have the window open, or the shade open, for takeoff and landing. We talked about that a little bit earlier, and that makes sense on a safety level. But as far as other than takeoffs and landings, I can't see any operational reason to have the window shade down. So I don't know. That's kind of an odd one. So thanks for your... Oh, and the reason why, I think you sensed, Andrew, that I was kind of being a little sarcastic about that survey that said that passengers really wanted bigger windows, because every time I fly in the back of the airplane, either as a non-revenue passenger or a deadheader, it's just incredible to me the number of people that have their window shades closed, and it's very frustrating for me, and perhaps you too, Andrew, who like looking out the window. And if you're not sitting at a window seat, you're helpless. You really can't say, hey, open the window. I've actually asked people, especially on the ground, for them to open it up a little bit, because I said, I'm a pilot and I really need to see outside. I just need to see outside, please. So that's all I know what to say about that, Andrew. Thanks for listening and sending feedback. Okay, we have feedback from Jim. He writes, Jim from Houston. On a recent episode, someone asked if FedEx or UPS ship on other carriers. And he said they often do for several reasons. First, to serve markets that they did not fly to. That makes sense. Continental and now United fly on behalf of FedEx to Guam. FedEx delivers the product from Narita from the USA, and United flies it to Guam. Often, FedEx will supplement their own international flying if they do not have enough capacity. For years, they used Continental from Houston Intercontinental to LHR. Let's see, that's Heathrow, I believe, and CDG, which is Charles de Gaulle, Paris. Regards, Jim from Houston. So thank you, Jim, for clarifying that question and answer. Chair City Dave writes, "Hi, Captain Jeff. The attached tweet came through a few moments after your announcement of a new APG episode yesterday, so I felt compelled to share." He says, "Pace bene." I think that means peace be with you, Chair City Dave. And the tweet that he sent to me from @lead today, or led today, LEADTODAY. The average number of people airborne over the United States any given hour is 61,000. So an average of 61,000 people over the United States at any given hour. 61,000. Wow, that's a big number. Thanks, Chair City Dave. Appreciate that. Michael Dell writes, "Found this in my collection of funny songs. It's a parody of the song that you use in your Captain's Log audio. It only has one bad word in it, in the same place as the original song. So I'll play a little bit of it so you can get a sense of what it is that he sent me. For those people that are part of the patron-only feed, I occasionally will do something I call the Captain's Log, and I use some music. Let me see if I can find it, if I have it here. Oh, I may not. Well, anyway, it's the Steve Miller song, Big Ol' Jet Airliner. And this is what Michael Dell sent me. Not the original.
Goodbye to all my friends I've known and the travel agent I trusted. I'm riding along on this beat up old plane. Look out the window, all the rivets are rusted. As that ground crew pushes us backwards on that rickety L1011.
Hey.
I'm feeling around for that flotation device. And when the safety film is shown, I'm paying close attention. Beat up old jetliner. Hope you got a tune up today. Oh, beat up old jetliner. Did they sneak you past the FAA? Bouncing round and up.
All right, that's enough of that. Thank you, Michael Dell, for sending that in. Very funny parody of the real song by Steve Miller, Big Ol' Jet Airliner, instead of Beat Up Old Jet Airliner. And I did not appreciate that comment about the L1011, by the way. Oh well, that was funny. Tim writes, onboard temperature control. On episode 103, marshalling powerbacks, one of the feedback questions was about the onboard temperature control, and I thought I would let you know, and your listeners know, if you didn't know, that the Airbus A320 has 3 separate temperature controls: cockpit, forward cabin, and aft cabin. I assume the larger Airbuses also have similar controls. I wonder what the A380 has for controls. Yeah, they probably have a bunch of them. I'm a new listener and enjoying your podcast very much. Hope you continue creating content for years to come. Thanks for the podcast. Well, thank you, Tim, for contributing your feedback to the show. And as I've said so many different times, that this wouldn't be much of a show at all. In fact, it probably wouldn't even be here anymore were it not for you, the listeners, and participating by sending in feedback and helping me answer questions. like you did, Tim. So I do appreciate that. And then that makes sense now, because a lot of times the flight attendants will call up on the Mad Dog, and they'll say, "Hey, could you heat it up in first class?" Or it's kind of getting cold in the the middle of the economy section. And I guess they have this idea that we have some pretty finite or fine zone control or something, but we just have basically two temperature controls, and one which is mostly for the cockpit and also a little bit of the first class area, and then the right air conditioning system is for the basically the cabin, most of the cabin, the economy cabin, and that's about it. We don't have much control over like individual zones or anything. So thank you very, very much, Tim, and continue to listen and send feedback. We do appreciate it. Now, Nick is one of those who sends a lot of feedbacks. So here we go. Nick writes, as a flight simulator pilot, when I can, I like to wake up in the middle of the night and start doing a flight. So that leads me to ask if there is a time of day you prefer to fly at. And I think many of you know the answer to this. I like flying during the daylight hours. I'm 55 years old, and my eyes are 55 years old as well. And as many of you listening know, the older you get, your vision diminishes a bit. Now, of course, I can still see, but one of the things you really notice when you get into your 40s, especially your mid-40s, two things. Number one, your night vision is just not as good as it was when you were in your teens and your 20s and even your 30s. And you start squinting when you're looking at, you're watching Jeopardy on television, on a small television screen, and you're starting to squint to see the text of the question. Or you're starting to, you're looking at the label on a can or some kind of a food product, and you're finding yourself having to squint to read the really, really tiny text. And that's, I guess, what is it? Your eyeballs kind of start hardening as you get older, or the corneas, some part of your eyeball starts hardening, and the muscles in there that are used to compress the cornea or the focusing mechanism on your eye, they're trying to push on this to change the shape so that you can focus on something that's close to you, like within a foot or two of your in your field of vision. And because the eyeball is older and it's getting stiffer and less malleable or flexible, or whatever term you want to use, those muscles just cannot overcome that as well as they did when you were younger. So that's why we end up using cheaters, magnifiers. And this actually, I do have an astigmatism, a slight astigmatism. And so these reading glasses that you see me wearing are prescription reading glasses. They're not just cheaters and magnifiers. So they correct for my astigmatism, and they also magnify so that I can now look at something that is 2 feet away from me, and it's all crystal clear. I can look at my approach plates and actually read them. And this is something, as I said, that most people start noticing in their mid-40s. Some earlier than that and some later than that. But my regular vision, looking at something 3 feet away or more, is still relatively sharp, and my distance vision is still pretty good as well. So I'm blessed to not have to wear glasses to see almost everything except for something that's close to me. So those are two things that happen. Your night vision isn't as good when you're in your mid-50s as I am, and your near vision, or your reading length vision, is not very good. Old eyes, I guess. So I do like flying during the daytime because of that. So I can see better. It feels more comfortable to me. Although I end up flying a lot of these trips where the first flight of the day is very early, and I'm essentially flying at night, but at least I've had a relatively good night's sleep, and I feel rested, and it's not the end of the day that I'm starting to fly, and it's dark, and you get the idea. So yeah, I do prefer not to fly at night if I can help it. On average, how much flying do you do each month? In general, my actual block-to-block flying hours every month is somewhere around probably 75 to 100 hours of actual flying time. How many flights are you allowed to do each month? Again, it's based on the number of hours, not the number of flights. And now with the new FAR 117 regulations, our flight duty periods are regulated to a maximum amount. Essentially, whatever works out to basically around 100 hours would be as much as you would be allowed to fly in a month. Now, you can fly a little bit more than that. You may actually get paid for more than 100 hours in a month. I have several previous months been paid more than 100 hours because I was flying something they call green slips that are all pay and no credit. Well, I don't want to go into all that. Too much detail. But I would say that a typical pilot flying narrow bodies, short to medium range kind of flying that I do, probably flies a 3 or 4 day trip a week. So 4 of those a month. So approximately 12 to 16 days per month. And on average, the type of trips that I fly, you fly about 3 flights per day. So what does that work out to be? Maybe 3 times 15, 45 flights in a month. That's just a guess. I don't know, just off the top of my head. Now, if you're flying internationally, you're going to fly many, many fewer flights than that, although you're going to be flying a lot of hours because the flights are longer. Okay, I was wondering if you have any attachment to a specific aircraft on any carrier. Yeah, I have an attachment to the Mad Dog at Acme because that's what I fly and that's what I get paid to do. I think I understand what you're saying. Is there anything in particular that you would just absolutely love to fly for whatever particular airline? And one of these days it wouldn't be bad to fly the 747. But no, it's not so important to me what airplane I fly. What's more important is my seniority and my pay, being able to pay my bills and have quality trips and spend quality time with my family. I just finished reading a www.airliners.net story regarding the whole U.S. Airways American Airlines merger, and there were comments on some of the old America West A320s that they were in the process of retiring them from their fleet. Therefore, how does manufacturer and or airlines judge that it's time for their planes to be retired? Well, every airplane is built with a certain length of service in mind, and a lot of times it has to do with the number of cycles that the airplane experiences. And when I say cycle, generally speaking, that's like a pressurization cycle, because that's one of the most stressful things on an airplane is just when you pressurize the airplane and you go up to altitude and you have all that pressure forcing on the skin of the airplane and then coming back down, and then the pressure is relieving, and like blowing up a balloon and then letting the air out of the balloon, blowing up a balloon, letting the air out of the balloon. You know that your experience with balloons, right? If you keep blowing up a balloon and letting the air out, after a certain amount of time, the material that the balloon is made from starts getting weaker and weaker and weaker. The same kind of thing. I know this is kind of a weak analogy, but the airplanes kind of have the same thing going on there. And so if you have too many of these pressurization cycles, something's going to give. And there are ways to, repair the balloon and restore the skin of the balloon so that you can blow up that balloon many, many more times. And not only just pressurization cycles, but you have, the landing gear has kind of lifetime limits. All the components have various expected lifetimes before they need to be completely overhauled. Engines, they're almost their own little creatures. Engines are being swapped on airplanes all the time, and you would think that when they build an airplane, the engine that was hanging on that airplane's wing or on the tail is the same engine that's going to be with that airplane for its lifetime. And no, the engines get pulled off airplanes and then replaced with other engines, and the old engine goes to the shop and gets completely overhauled, and then it gets put on a different airplane, in the same type of airplane usually. So they kind of have their own lives and lifetimes and life expectancies and that kind of thing. So, honestly, if one of the mechanics out there is listening, and I know I have several that do, perhaps you could give more of a definitive answer for Nick as to, who determines the life of an airplane, an airframe. Another one of those components that is critical in the lifetime of an airplane is the wing spar, supporting all that loading and unloading, day after day, flight after flight. After a certain amount of time, that needs to be examined and replaced if necessary, which is a very expensive proposition. And sometimes it's so expensive that the airline will just send the airplane to the desert or one of these places that basically just uses it as scrap metal because it's just too expensive to replace the wing spar or whatever. So I did my best in answering that. I hope that was pretty accurate. I can't say 100% sure that it was the definitive answer, Nick, but I'm sure that one of these mechanics listening right now will chime in. And so listen for further clarification on that in the future. So thanks again, Nick, for your feedback. Let's see. Let me play something here so I can kind of take a little break. Philip writes, first of all, thanks for the great podcast. You're welcome. It really takes or makes the long hours en route fly by. Have you ever been to Russia? No. You have now? Okay, great. I was in Russia, at least with Philip, anyway. I took this a few days ago on a flight from London to Yekaterinburg. Probably did not pronounce that correctly, in Russia. At 5.5 hours, this is one of the longer routes I fly. So, hello to you from flight level 410. Oh, Philip is a pilot, a professional pilot, and he took a picture of, I'm not sure what the screen is. If this is a ACARS display or if this is some kind of a comm panel, but he has there at the very bottom of the screen, it has all these frequencies. COM 1 is on 125.2, NAV 1 is on 117.8. You get the idea. And at the very bottom of the screen, he says, "Hi, Jeff, a.k.a. APG." So that's pretty cool. And the other picture that he threw in here is of, again, the cockpit from his viewpoint, I guess. And he is holding what appears to be a tablet device, looks to me like a iPad mini. And he is apparently listening to my podcast on it because it has my airline pilot guy avatar, my logo on his screen. So very, very cool. Thank you. What kind of airplane is that, Philip? That is a unusual looking control yoke. I don't recognize that. Interesting. Okay. So let me get back to his feedback. So, hello to you from Flight Level 410. A few episodes ago, a listener asked about family life, lifestyle, and being a pilot. I work a 6/5 roster, which means 6 days away and 5 days off, and have a wife and 2 young kids. Whilst I do miss my family when I'm away, and vice versa, I can tell you it really has strengthened my marriage and my relationship with the kids. I'm sure if I was working a 9-to-5 job, we'd bicker and fight, yell at the kids, get in each other's way, etc., etc. But actually, as you rightly said, absence makes the heart grow fonder. The highlight of my week is coming home and the kids running out to see me and to tell me all they've been up to whilst I've been away. I must say, though, 6 days away from home would be much, much harder without Skype, FaceTime, etc. Of course, it really helps that I do a job I love. I've never really felt like I've worked a day in the 10 years or so I've been flying professionally. I really spend my 6 days away doing my hobby, exploring the world and having adventures I just wouldn't get to do in any other job. The truth is, I'd do this job for a lot less money, but shh, don't tell my employer that. And I know what you mean, Philip. This is just my experience, of course. I have many friends and colleagues in this profession that find family life a struggle. Keep up the good work. Philip from the UK. And he said, P.S. It was great to hear you guest hosting Plane Talking UK. Thanks, Philip. I really enjoyed that as well. Carlos is just a peach of a guy. And if you're wondering what that means in the UK, that's a good thing. And I really appreciate your feedback and you taking me along with you in Russia. We'll have to do it again sometime. All right. Let's move on to Chad. Let's see, how are we doing on the time? I've been going, oh no, another hour and 10 minutes. Let's see. This is usually that time in my podcast where I start looking, scrolling down, seeing how much feedback I'm not going to get to on this episode. Yep. I'm not going to get to everybody's, of course. And again, this is a good time to mention that when you do send me feedback, I may never actually answer your feedback on the show. I may try to answer it via email. Sometimes, you know, I do my best, but sometimes I somehow lose people's feedback, not, you know, on purpose, but inadvertently. I'm not very good at organizing things, and sometimes things get lost in the shuffle. And sometimes people ask questions that have been asked many, many times by many other people, and maybe they're a new listener, and they just started listening, you know, at episode number 95 or 105, and they haven't listened to the previous 100 episodes where I've probably answered that question at least once or twice or more. And so sometimes I won't answer your question. I may try to direct you back to an earlier episode where I do answer that question. Do me a favor, though. I know that some of you send me, I have a bunch, it's partially all my fault. I have a bunch of different email addresses, and I think a lot has to do with the fact that sometimes I respond to you with my Gmail address, and not my feedback at Airline Pilot Guy address, and then all of a sudden, now our future correspondence is all via the Gmail thing. And I have the system set up, and sorry for the tech details here, everybody, but I have the system to help me be more organized so that when you send something, to feedback at Airline Pilot Guy, it automatically gets sent to one of my notebooks in my Evernote app, which I love. Evernote is just a wonderful, wonderful app. And if you want me, by the way, to send you a link that gives you a little bit of a trial period for the premium version of Evernote, and it also helps you with storage space, and it helps me as well, let me know, and I'll send you that an invitation or a referral. But unfortunately, they don't have like a link that I can just send you to. It has to be an individual email that I send to you. Well, anyway. So you send something to my feedback at airlinepilotguy.com. It automatically gets sent to my Evernote inbox, and it doesn't get lost. It's there. But if you send it to any of the other email addresses that I have, I may or may not remember to put it in the queue for answering on the show. So if you don't mind, in the future, send feedback. Make sure you send it to feedback at airlinepilotguy.com, or at least add that as one of the addresses. That way, I'll be sure to see it and remember to read it and answer it on the show, for the most part, unless it's one of those that's been asked many, many times. I need to come up with a FAQ, or a frequently asked questions, an FAQ, perhaps to cover some of the questions that have been asked many, many, many times, and I've answered them many, many times, and that might help things as well. So a lot of great suggestions out there by my listeners, including one that the guys were talking about last night, that to establish a wiki, show notes wiki, for you while you're listening to the show, because sometimes I'll mention something and I'll have that link in the show notes, and then you go to my show notes and you go, Captain Jeff, it's not in your show notes, and it's just because I forgot to put it there. So I may be in the future kind of relegating, or what's the word I'm looking for? Subcontracting my work to you, my listeners, to help me with my show notes, as far as making sure that all of the links that I had mentioned in the show actually do show up in the show notes. Okay, so a lot more than I wanted to say about email feedback, but I guess the bottom line is that if you send me something, regardless of which email address you use, or whether you send it via SpeakPipe, or my feedback line, my Google Voice number, or my YouTube, if you comment on YouTube, if you send a comment to the airlinepilotguy.com website, I make every effort to read it all, and I see it all. I may not actually respond to 100% of it, but be assured that it was seen by me. Okay, maybe not right away, but it will eventually be seen by me, and I do appreciate all the comments. Well, almost all of them. So that is what I wanted to say about feedback. And again, if you would like to send feedback to me via email, or if you'd like to make a recording on your Samsung Galaxy Core, as Ahmad did from Africa, you can attach it to your feedback email and send it to feedback@airlinepilotguy.com. Whew, that was a long way to go for that, wasn't it? You can call up the Google Voice feedback line, which is not super high quality, but it'll work. Area code 304-99-PILOT, area code 304-997-4568. And the SpeakPipe thing, head it over to airlinepilotguy.com/contact me. You'll see that link on the website, and then there's a form there you can fill out and send it to me. There's a SpeakPipe widget there that you can use to record using your computer's built-in microphone, or a external microphone if you have one attached. Oh, there are just so many ways to do this. So I do really appreciate all of your feedback, all of you listening, supporting the show, etc. Again, as I said so many times, I couldn't do it without you, and I really honestly mean that. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and end the show. I have 2 more days remaining in this show, 1 day off on Saturday, back out again on Sunday for another 4-day trip. Not sure if I'll be able to put out another show during that trip, or if I'll wait until I come home. I'll try to do another one next week, and maybe I'll catch up to your feedback. No way. So until next week and next episode, wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care, and God bless.
Good day.